transition over. And here we go. Hi there, everybody. My name is Nuj, and welcome to the 2023 production panel for the summit. We're here with Leslee Sullivant, a senior producer at Netflix, Jeff Yabumoto, a associate content producer at Riot Games, and Evan Donohue, a lead producer at NantGames. So y'all can have bigger introductions if you want, and then we'll get started.
Sure, I'll go first. I can give a very brief TLDR of my background. I've been in games for about 13 years. Started off working on League of Legends for about 6 of those years. While I was still in school, I went through customer service, then narrative design, then development management. And then after that, went to 2K, worked at a couple different studios there as a producer. Went to Scopely to work on Marvel Strike Force as design producer, then Meta to work on Beat Saber. Most recently, Blizzard to work on WoW for a brief period of time. And now I'm at Netflix as of this week as a senior producer. And that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. I like Strike Force. That's a good game.
It's fun. I play it every single day.
I can go next. My name is Evan Donohue. I'm a lead producer at NantGames. I've spent the last 13 years too, working as a producer and project manager. I started my career, I worked at 2 different startups. I was QA and like a production intern, and then I became a producer, and I worked on Flash games, rest in peace Flash, and browser-based games. Then I went to Disney Interactive, where I worked on mobile and console games, as well as some streaming and media apps like the Star Wars app, and I helped with like the first guinea pig app before Disney Plus came out. I helped ship that. Yeah. And then after that, I'm really into sports too. Besides video games, I got a chance to go work at NFL Digital Media for a little bit. I worked on their console and mobile streaming apps, and now I'm at NantGames, where we have a team working on building a mobile game from scratch. That's me.
Very cool. And I'm Jeff. I've not been in games as long, but I've been in LA working as a video editor for a long time, doing post-production and stuff like that. Then I moved into gaming and esports as a journalist, which was a lot of fun. And that kind of led me around to a lot of different employers and stuff like working for Newegg, doing tech reviews there. And then I got to IGN doing like those little mini video documentaries that are a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that as like a producer. And then that moved me over to Riot Games, where I'm a producer working on League of Legends now, but I also worked on Valorant when I was first hired.
Nice.
Awesome. Welcome everybody to the production panel. We have a lot of great panelists here. So we'll get started with the questions. The first question I'd like to ask is, how would you define your role as producer? What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Who wants to go first?
All right, I can go first. For me, like being a producer every day and like day to day, it's a lot of checking schedules, what's coming out, figuring out who is responsible for what that day and what needs to get done that day. In my actual day to day, like a lot of it is working with the League of Legends client and making sure what we can get into the client to promote the various initiatives. So as part of North America, I'll be looking at the esports tab in the League of Legends client, making sure the content from broadcast we want is going in there, making sure we're getting the correct thumbnails and stuff like that and copy. And when I run into a problem, it's figuring out who I need to talk to fix it, or if I'm the one who needs to fix it, but it's like and in this case me, the centerpiece of like fixing everything and making sure those answers are coming around.
So kind of like a bridge between the different teams.
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's predominantly what I do day to day too. I just work with all the different cross-discipline teams that we're working on the game, whether it's art, design, testers, all the different engineers. We've tons of different disciplines, and working with them to make sure that if they're blocked on something, I help unblock them. I work with the other producers to run all of the agile ceremonies. So we'll have like daily stand-ups. We'll also plan out new work, make sure that we break it down properly. And then another big important thing for a producer is, after a sprint or a certain amount of weeks of work is done, we then go through a retrospective and close it out and give everyone a little bit of time to shine about what work they've done. but making sure we facilitate that. And like Jeff said, you're that central cog to make sure that everything continues to flow. And if there is blockers, you got to knock them out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, to add to that, I think both Jeff and Evan really nicely summarized what a producer does. Do a lot of raising flags, so trying to like look far ahead and be like, that's going to be a problem. Like I'm the person getting annoying about, hey guys, like have you thought about this? We're gonna have to think about it. So please, I know you have a lot to do right now, but we also think about this other thing too. So it's a lot of doing that, and then also like communication and figuring out how we can better communicate across those teams, and like what we have to change in our processes to better accommodate all of our other team members.
Dependency management, everyone's favorite 2 words, right?
Yep.
In the audience, if you don't know those 2 words and you want to be a producer, make sure you know what they mean. I'd like to ask, what's your favorite part about being a producer? It can be anything.
I think my favorite part is really just when you get all the different disciplines together. We do this thing called strike teams where we have a couple people from each discipline, and they work together on a feature. Like we'll get a spec, what the feature is supposed to be. Everyone will read it, they'll give feedback, and then we'll work together to walk through it, do wireframes, and make sure that we like another big part of a spec. Not every studio does this, but a lot of places will write user stories. Like a product manager or game designer will call out how the feature is supposed to be built. And that's one discipline calling it out. And then you really have to think, and you have to facilitate with that strike team and say, hey, what does everyone need to do in order to complete this? All the way from building it with engineers, animations, visual effects, all the way to have we tested it properly? Is there analytics tied to it? Have we verified the analytics? So just helping that strike team, start and go all the way to the end it's been really nice. And a big thing that we like to do in NantGames that we're trying to do is we give like crazy nicknames to each of the strike teams. So it's fun, like hearing what people come up with too.
That's also my favorite part, is the being able to work with so many different people and pulling together a team to make something really awesome. It's part of the reason why I moved out of narrative design as well. Like I really enjoyed being that person doing my like part of the project, but the part of like that process that I enjoyed more was being a part of that team and then working with my producer, or at the time like my development manager. And so being able to like identify that and be like, that's what I want to do. Like I like bringing these people together to make something so super cool. That's my favorite part of being a producer.
Awesome. Yeah, I think for me, it's a lot of right after you pitch something and it gets approved, especially for like marketing campaigns of like the latest whatever's going out, and like that moment right there is like, yeah, you can go for it. And I'm like, yes. And then it's all downhill from there as you like go through it and then hit all the problems you did not foresee. And then you get that elation like once again when like it actually launches to public. So like those 2 moments and then just that canyon in between is not fun.
Working on like a live service game, especially,
Yeah.
Yes.
where it's kind of constantly laying the train tracks, like that Tom and Jerry skit.
Totally.
Yeah, because games are very interdisciplinary in a way that I think not many other mediums are. So, like that makes a lot of sense. Like being a producer means that you're working with that interdisciplinariness a lot, in a lot of ways. Uh, what are some of the differences between the junior and senior roles as a producer?
I feel like as I have grown in my career, I'm now more used to being a part of like higher level team-wide or studio-wide processes, rather than like in the earlier days of my production career, I was like allocated to one specific part of the team or part of the process. With a big caveat is that I think that really depends on the studio or the project, where there will be teams out there that are either smaller in size, or because of your manager, even if you are earlier on in your production career, they will have you take on like bigger pieces of the project. But that's like one thing that I think is different between a junior producer and someone more senior. And I also feel like a lot of more senior producers focus less on like the immediate game problems or the tasks that go into games, and it's more team focused. And taking on a lot of more of that personnel management part of the job as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. And I think another thing to add is that the junior roles tend to communicate and coordinate a little bit more with like QA or specific disciplines. Maybe they run one strike team, or they host or produce a couple of features, but it's very day to day, like Leslie said. And I've definitely noticed over my career, but also seeing other like directors or EPs, executive producers, they're totally looking at that 10,000-foot view. What's the roadmap looking like for the next 2 years? What are our partnerships? Like, how do we enable the game to succeed beyond launch, especially with live service games? You really have to be thinking outwards about, what's going to make this game succeed, what's going to make the next game succeed. And then you also start looking at, studio process, like you mentioned too.
Because there's kind of scaffolding with live service games that it's not just you release this and then you decide whether to continue working on it. It's continuously building.
Yes.
Yeah, I think like to add on to what Leslie said is like the higher up you go, like the more team-wide stuff you get. And so that means as that junior producer, it is a lot of your job to maintain that day to day. So they can actually focus on those things because they're in meetings all day long sometimes. Like you just look at a calendar and like you're trying to schedule and it's just there's no room. And so like you just have to deal with that. And it makes like that junior producer's job is just to make it easier for your lead producer.
Oh.
And that's a lot of what I do.
Yeah, definitely. Like that, and especially it's interesting to hear that team size can also affect production and what you do in it as much as whether you're a junior or senior, which makes sense because in a smaller team, there's there's more to do, less people who can potentially work on it. Awesome. For our next question, I'd like to ask if you've ever worked on a project with more than one producer, how did you collaborate with other producers?
A good question. Definitely. I think that, like we just mentioned, the team size or the studio size, right? Like you might have shared services like a data team or analytics team that is servicing multiple games or apps. You're going to have to work with them if you want analytics verification or, data added to a database to service your game. Or it may be that the game is big enough where you have like a live ops producer and a tech art producer, and there's tech producers too. So lots of different producers, and really all of those have to be aligned because a studio or a game is generally going to have the same schedule for the entire team. So you might have a 2-3 weeks sprint, and it doesn't matter if you're just like the live ops producer. You're going to have to work with, I've had to work with data producers, I've had to work with tech art producers, and we have to make sure that the schedules are aligned. And the most important thing about that is if you're working with other producers, you have to make sure that you call out, I'm going to use the word again, dependencies quickly and often, because if you have something that needs data, like I mentioned earlier, or you need a game design spec done from the game design team, and there's a different producer that's managing that, you have to let them know so that you get it in enough time so that you can build out whatever your team that you're producing is working on.
Yeah, I mean, that feels pretty accurate to me. I think it's also figuring out that division of labor a lot of times between producers and kind of like who is that boss producer in a sense. Like someone is responsible for everything and making sure like even other producers get their job done, and like so you have to report into them. So knowing that hierarchy also helps, and yeah, probably a big part of it.
The way I guess to give like a specific example, like on World of Warcraft, there are 1 million producers, and I was a producer on the Encounters team, and that's the team responsible for making dungeons and raids and WoW. And I very frequently worked with the dungeon art producers. Every single day we would talk because they were responsible for managing the dungeon art schedule, and they would be able to tell me who was doing what, when things were expected to come in. We would frequently be in meetings together, or we would coordinate and to be like, hey, can you go tank that meeting over there? Let me know what like the encounter designers need to do, and I will go to this one and I will relay information. And just really being in lockstep about, like, if we want to do X thing in this dungeon, how does that work out for your bandwidth on the dungeon art side? And really having that conversation constantly. And that was expanded to, the character art producer and the animation producer, the VFX, every single team that needed to come together to build this experience. I would talk to those producers on an almost daily basis to just make sure we were not going off on completely different things. A lot of it was like, validating, we're not signing up, not signing too big of a check for someone else and they can't cash it, basically. Keeping us all accountable.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm hearing a lot of the word dependency thrown around, and that makes sense. Like if one, I remember for one interview that I had, we had to, as a before the interview assignment, construct a chart and a schedule based off of all these dependencies, and that was really interesting to kind of like work through. And for the next question, I'd like to ask, what tools do you use as a part of production? So things like Jira, Trello, stuff like that.
Yeah. Short answer, yes. It's a lot of like, for me, it's a lot of Airtable and Slack. But like Airtable, Jira, Asana, Trello, like it's all kind of like, one, you can probably figure out the rest of them. But for me, like aside from that, it's a lot of personal Slack messages to myself of just like random notes of like things I need to follow up on, all divided by the EM dashes. And just like, all right, I need to get this done for today. And so there's a lot of that in my personal Slack. And then a lot of like Google spreadsheets that are color coded between like, not started, in progress, complete, like with notes columns, notes color coded, and stuff like that really helps me, especially on like big projects where there's a lot of moving parts, figure out just the status of everything really quickly. And that's a really good tool for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Jira seems to be the video game industry standard. There's a couple of caveats, like some people use DevTrack, but Jira seems to have just infiltrated everywhere. So definitely learn Jira. There's like an actual query language, Jira, it's called JQL. Definitely watch some YouTube videos. I'm sure it's going to be super dry, but if you're interested in doing production, you definitely want to learn about that. And Confluence is the other big thing that's used alongside Jira. It's like a wiki, and it's password protected. You can only get on VPN, so you can literally put like, generally people put whole game design documents or how each team works on Confluence. So you'll end up using that a lot for specs, so you can go back and reference it. We use that quite a bit, and I definitely agree on the spreadsheets. Excel, Google Sheets are great because you can collaborate. Microsoft has like a version that if you have to use Microsoft for like sharing spreadsheets, and I love. I mean, what producer doesn't like spreadsheets? But it's important too that you collaborate on them. Like we use it a lot for triage. Like you might have 100 bugs in your game. You have to cut down which ones are priority 1s versus 2s versus we can wait till the next release. So being able to collaborate with other teams on the spreadsheets is good. I like that you said Airtable. I've been looking at that. Figma and FigJam are really great too. It's a design library, and FigJam is really cool. It's like a collaborative whiteboarding tool. People use Lucidchart too for whiteboarding. I really like FigJam though, because you can literally all sit there. You can use it for a retro as well, and it'll update in real time. If you've got 10 people doing a brainstorm, you can write flow charts and stuff like that. So it's pretty handy.
I have nothing else to add. Those are all the tools. But actually, it's an add-on to the Jira comment too. I think anybody can sign up for free, and like
Yes.
the instance is free up to 10 people. So
Yes.
like, I highly recommend not only like watching videos, but try to get your hands dirty a little bit. Like just try it out and see the functionality, because you can create tasks and develop, Gantt charts in there and see all their filters and everything. I would highly recommend playing around
Would
with it.
using it for personal reasons, like if you have some sort
Yeah.
of personal project, would that be a good way to learn the tool?
Yeah, absolutely.
And after 15 years, they finally added dark mode. So
Oh my god, that
It's so
changes.
good.
their dark mode's really good.
Yeah.
I guess that's why it was 15 years in development.
Right?
Awesome. For the next question, I'd like to ask, how can somebody coming right out of college best tailor their resume for production?
This one is interesting. So what I look for in resumes is I am looking for impact, rather than just I was responsible for X, Y, and Z. That's cool if you can lay out what your responsibilities were, but how did those actually manifest? What did that lead to? And so for someone who's looking for a production role, I'm looking for how did you improve a process? What does that lead to? Did it cut down on time? Did it clarify something? Did you get people on board more quickly? What was it that led to that? If you want to focus more on bug triage, a quantity and how quickly you're able to burn those down, something like that. Those are not the best examples, but that's what I'm truly looking for, is your actual impact on those project management / production-y skills.
Yeah, I agree. The being able to define that value is so critical. I think alongside that, in parallel, as a producer, you're communicating a lot with the whole team. So you do also want to put an emphasis on your soft skills, like how proactive you are. Are you a self-starter? Talking about your ability to communicate and be a critical thinker. All of that is really critical. And I think the third part of something that's really important to show on your resume is finished products. I think a lot of studios and game dev studios are looking for games that you've helped ship, because that shows that you can finish something. And especially at the beginning of your career, you really should be focused on just showing that you can complete projects. What did you contribute? Like Leslie said, where did you add value as the producer? That's super great if you can show that on your resume, some finished stuff.
Well, you guys covered it all. I can say that. I think the only thing I could add is to add on to Leslie's point, for me, you got to look for opportunities of how you can showcase, those contributions. So, and it's not necessarily in producing all the time. When I was a video editor at Newegg, I implemented a new file system, and that did stuff like improve our search times, improved, stuff like that by, I don't know, 5-10%, pick a number, but it improved our processes, which is something that you can show and people like. Or, creating something as simple as a new file template for a video editing project or something like that. That cuts down on time, not only for you, but for any freelancers you might work with. So you're onboarding them a lot quicker now. So it's stuff like that is always really helpful.
Having those finished examples of things you've worked on, how impact driven, like Leslie said, that makes a lot of sense. As a build up of that, what are some essential students or essential skills that an aspiring producer can build while at university? Maybe if they don't, since I don't know how many, if there are game design or game production tracks, if they necessarily, for those who are outside of that.
I'll say it again, get with your classmates and just try and build games. Especially early in your career. It doesn't need to be AAA. Seriously, it can just be something browser. There's a lot of free engines out there. Don't languish 2 years on one project. Just, even if it's just a small loop that you can prove is engaging and that people actually want to play, that's what matters. You don't need, you're gonna get on a studio team or a startup where you're actually going to go and try and make something polished. I will say that on top of smaller projects, if you can have 1 or 2 that do feel a little more polished, that's important to show as well. I think that this doesn't require being at a studio, but I think being able to break down work into smaller digestible tasks is also something that you could do. I mean, think about if you're making a complex pasta dish and you have to break down what are all the steps and ingredients that you need to make it. You don't need to have game experience to do that. You could literally go into a free version of Jira, break down all of the ingredients and the steps to make it, and you just replicate that when you're actually thinking about how you want to build games with other people, because that is something that you're going to be doing a lot as producers. You have to be able to break down work for multiple disciplines.
Yeah, to add on that, I guess like a boring answer is also to brush up on Excel skills and Google Sheets. Truly know how to wield those. I think people really like looking at those for schedules. I know there are tools out there that exist that actually build them out for you, but a lot of the time, and even I'm more comfortable being like, I'm just going to create it. We're just going to do it. We're going to do it. Fill out some cells. But being able to use the formulas in there and, to be able to represent where work is, like the status of work and how long it's going to take and everything, Excel is going to be your friend, one way or another. Even if your studio has purchased all these project management tools, I guarantee at some point someone's going to rig up a spreadsheet to solve a problem. And just being able to represent work on in either that or sheets, I think is a good thing to have.
Definitely. I think kind of building off Evan, like if you want to like work on like those small projects, like in your college, so look at something like a thesis program for the games design area. They're always going to need help on stuff like this, so you can actually practice more hands-on with organizing, producing, and stuff like that with games that these other students are creating that need that kind of producer help a lot of times. I helped out myself on a USC games thesis project, so that was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of good practice.
Couldn't agree more with both of you. All roads lead back to Excel.
So scarily powerful too. When I was getting into the formulas, it was like a rabbit hole falling down into it. For our last question before we move on to audience questions, we were talking about this a little bit before the stream began, but how has production been different during remote or hybrid work compared to when it was purely in person?
I found that I've had to completely change the way I communicate. And I think for the better. Like if I had been doing this in a way that translates in person, I would have been more successful earlier in my career as well. But remote work really forced it to happen, which is the way I ask questions is different to get very clear answers and very simple answers too, where I will I have to listen to somebody talk and I'll be like, okay, now hear me out. Here are two questions, yes or no, and then depending on one of those answers, I have a follow-up. And so that it really has. I have gone through a communication change to get very clear answers so I can bring that back to my team and proceed onward. But being able to demystify in this remote work space is that's been big for me. Stand-ups have changed. So instead of actually standing up and doing a 15-minute stand-up in the morning, depending on the size of the team, I don't even do a Zoom one anymore. I just do it through Slack where I ask, what are you working on today? Do you have any blockers? That's it. And it's a thread and people just reply to that. And that way it's very easy for me to take a look at it and be like, oh, this person has been stuck on this thing for 3 days when it should have only taken one. Like what's going on there? And so it allows a very easy way for me to come in and be like, hey, is there anything I can help with? Like what's going on here? Can we get someone else on it? And just finding ways to interject that kind of to back up a little bit, I feel like with remote work, it's very easy for people to go and work in a corner by themselves and not reach out for help. And it's been my job to try to rectify that in some way, and finding ways to do it that's been the big challenge with remote work in production.
Yeah, I gotta agree. Like remote work, it's a little different because you can't have eyes on people all the time. Not to micromanage, but like you can't see when someone's struggling or they're staying late for work because there's no visibility. So like you can't offer that help because that they're overwhelmed because you don't know it because they're not reaching out. So stuff like that where you just have to kind of start learning people, like learning how people work and how much they can actually handle. And that takes a while because you have to get to know them, and that can sometimes be harder remote. So stuff like that is always a little bit different. And then sometimes getting those simple answers is also really hard, because in an office environment, you can just walk over to someone. In a remote environment, you got to just message them, and then it might be an hour later.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. And I definitely agree, Jeff, that it's harder to foster those individual conversations. Like you can DM someone and check on them or do like a Zoom. But it actually is easier to host larger meetings because you don't have to fight for a meeting room, book it, and then you have that person that's waiting near the door right as your meeting is ending in real life or in physical form. You would always have to fight over meeting rooms, and it's nice to not have to fight over that. You just have a Zoom and you just go. But I do miss the ability to like go walk and have a coffee or take a couple people out to lunch. So it's like that part is frustrating as a producer. And we try to do check-in things where uh, we'll try to spend like 5 minutes with each person, like production and the creative director. We'll spend 5 minutes with everyone, like every week or every other week, just to see how they're doing. Now, don't talk about the sprint board. How are you doing? Have you played the game recently? What do you think about feedback? What do you think about features that are coming up? But even doing that, it's still hard because you miss that. And I love what you said about new people or joining a team during remote is difficult, Jeff. It's a little bit easier if you have that relationship with them from going from physical to digital. Yeah.
The idea that when it's remote, it's more difficult to see when people are overworking themselves or whether they're working after hours. That's really interesting. And it's one that I had thought about but never really like. It's interesting to hear that that's kind of like what comes on a producer's mind. Now we're going to move on to some audience questions. We have some. I've been DM'd by one of our officers, so I'll go through those. Emily in chat asks, "How was your first game production internship or job like?"
I mean, it's kind of crazy. You kind of get thrown into everything, and then the first month you're just doing nothing but like trying to absorb everything, and it's so frustrating at times because you want to be doing something that entire time, but like you just don't know enough. You don't know the processes, you don't know who to ask, and so it's just this month-long learning process. Like, let me go, and they're not letting you yet. And so it's you gotta be patient, but you get there. Usually after that first month, you get there and like you can start figuring out what's going on. And like when I transferred teams from Valorant to League, like there was not that transition moment again. It was like I knew what to do. I could keep doing this. So it's just like that first onboarding month can be rough.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's always a little awkward, I feel like, because it's production has like this weird problem of you're not having like tangible output sometimes. Like it's more obvious in other disciplines. And so I think if you go into your first production role and you're like, what am I doing here? That's totally normal. You at one morning you'll wake up and you'll realize like you've hit your stride and you are actually adding value. There's definitely some momentum that has to take place. But it's, in my experience, completely normal experience to have.
Yeah, it's like those awkward first few weeks at a new school, I don't know. You guys both hit it pretty hard. Just try to learn about the project and the team as much as possible, especially if you're going to be working with maybe some new disciplines, especially if it's your first, gig or you're doing an internship. Try to learn about, how many different artists. There's 2D artists, there's 3D modelers, um, graphic artists. There might be 3D animators. So like try to learn all about that. And then there's all these different engineers, different game designers. There's narrative, there's level designers, game designers, combat designers. So try to learn about what each person's doing and the kind of their work style, because you're going to have to learn that eventually. So might try to stack it up front and play whatever product you're playing. If it's live or the latest build, that really helps too. That shows initiative.
I'd also say +1 to all of that, and then also digging into like the history of the project and
Yes.
what they've tried before in terms of production or how they're used to working and like what those challenges have been. Because I
Great
like
point.
you shouldn't feel like compelled to go and fix everything 100% immediately. That's impossible. But like being able to be like, oh, okay, like I've heard this artist over here say this complaint, and this designer also has a very similar one. Maybe there's something here, like something small I can start interjecting or changing about the process to help both of these people out. But really getting the context as to why things are the way they are, I think, is an important first step in that new role.
I think the idea that it's hard to kind of quantify or see the impact of production is like that makes sense because you want things to be going smoothly. So ideally speaking, you want to kind of be under the radar a bit during your time, and that's probably definitely stressful for new producers just trying to get try to both be noticed and fly under the radar at the same time. For the next question from Ahuban, we have: what current skills do you continue to improve on even as a professional in the field?
Interesting question. I think it's important to, because you're building, for lack of a better term, software. If you're working in the game industry, generally you're working on building a console. You're usually building software. I think it's important to understand what engine you're using. Whether if you're working at a studio and they have their own engine, try to learn from. There's going to be teams that are building the engine. Learn from them. But if not, definitely stay ahead of the curve on whatever engine you're using, Unreal, Unity, because they've got a roadmap for new features, and you may end up wanting to use it, and you kind of have to balance that with like your production roadmap, right? Like Unity or Unreal might bring something out that's a beta feature, and you don't generally add things if it's in beta, but like you got to find that timing. But to finish the answer, it really just comes down to, if you got to know the tech you're using to build it, not to the point where you're writing the code and the logic, but enough where you can help produce with the team that is building on that engine. I think that really helps because those engines they always have new stuff coming out.
I don't know. I mean, Excel. But like on a more like learning more about the company and like how other people's jobs you're interacting with are how they're done and what problems they're going to run into. So it's a lot of people skills at that point. Like learning this is what we need to get done every week. Are there any of those roadblocks and stuff like that? And then if you're more on like the marketing side, like I am, it's consuming just the media. Like what else is going on there with your competitors, your main competitors and your secondary competitors? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? So you just gotta keep watching, keep learning, and keep consuming a lot of the time.
The games and marketing strategies too.
For me, something I find myself continually working on is negotiating and mediating. So being able to take two different parties and having either opposite ones or things that are just not quite aligned, and being like, okay, how can we find a compromise here? And then like between two equal levels, like that's one thing, but then also trying to pitch that upwards and being like, hey, you asked for the moon, but like, can we like aim just like a little bit lower than that? And here are some compelling reasons why. And actually being prepared to show like why we can't achieve that, or if we do, here's what it's going to cost us, whether it's in dollars or burnout, right? That's something I'm continually trying to like level up as I grow in my career.
Thank you for
Makes a
saying
lot of
that.
sense.
I can't believe we've gone this long and we haven't like kind of touched on scope creep. So thank you for bringing that up. That's something you definitely got to watch out for. Is
Yeah.
everyone's trying to add scope, and as a producer, you got to wrangle it in, like Leslie said.
Yeah, I find myself more apologizing more and more for being a cop, and I'm like, look, I'm not trying to be a cop, but I am kind of the no police at times, where I'm just like, it's honing that language too, where I'm like, this sounds really cool, amazing, like nugget of an idea. I'm a little concerned about how big this could be. So like, let's go have a conversation about it, and like being able to like, yeah, identify that, and then also people are enthusiastic about what they want to do, and not squashing it immediately is also a honed skill that I'm continually trying to improve upon as well.
When I was a producer for a game with the SGSU Summer Games Workshop, there were those times where I was like, I would love to add this. This would make our game really cool. We do not have the time. If we had like another sprint, this would work out great. We do not have the time right now. For our next question from Jason, do you need any programming knowledge to be a producer?
No, you don't. I mean, the more you can learn about tech, the better. But there's some simple scripting you can do with like Excel and Jira. I mentioned JQL earlier, but it's not complicated. I think it's more important to know. I mean, sometimes if you're a tech producer, there are tech art and tech producers, and they will have specific solution or problems they need to help dig in a little bit more. But generally, like just general game production, live ops, even some like game producers, like or game design producers, they don't really need any coding.
Yeah, I think the only thing you might want to be familiar with, and this completely depends on your studio and the way it runs too, is like get to know Perforce or GitHub. Like just understand that process in case they do expect you to check anything in. That's like the closest I've been asked to do anything remotely technical.
Yeah.
I think. I'm trying to recall, but I think that's it.
Check things into Perforce. Maybe sometimes you'll have to like go into Jenkins and fire off a new build. That's a tool that you use to like generate new builds automatically without a bunch of manual process. But that's really just pressing buttons, not like actually going in and changing Jenkins.
Yeah, I think the closest thing I would ever get to is like website programming, which is pretty simple. So yeah, you don't need to know a lot.
I saw the chorus of heads saying no at the beginning, but I saw where this one was going. For next question from Rafa, we have: how do you advocate and mediate any discussion or arguments within your team regarding game decisions, and make sure nobody gets angry or that a decision gets done quickly so that doesn't affect the timeline?
I mean, this goes into scope creep a lot of the time. I feel like, I mean, you got to be the bad guy sometimes, but like when you're being that bad guy that says no, you got to know how, like, what the objectives and like key results of this project are, and when you need to hit them, and you need to be able to argue that very well of like, this is exactly why we cannot do this. I know you want to do it, like Leslie said, but like we just can't. And so stuff like that, and hopefully you're good enough at this to like make the person arguing for this not feel bad. They're not going to get angry, and you've got a good enough relationship. Like, we just need to like propose a solution. Like, okay, if you bring this to me earlier next time, that might be a solution that you can go with and like help mediate that.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, how much time is left till the next milestone. And then if you don't have that time, talk about, well, is this idea like the bigger idea for this example, we put this in the backlog where we have all the other tasks that are coming up, and then we can talk about prioritizing it, like so that you're not killing off their idea, but you're saying we're not going to do it right now. I think that that's super critical. And I think sometimes it can come down to especially if the two people aren't necessarily like, if there's a lead versus maybe an associate, and there's still conflict, like you may need to sit each of them down, have a little conversation about what's going on, why there's some frustration, and then try to bring them together to find like a reasonable solution, whether it's move it to the backlog or, you know, the associate discipline resource, their idea is maybe not fully fleshed out, if they can like give a flow chart or a little bit more of a spec and bring it back to the lead, that might help too.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. A lot of it comes down to like empathy and making sure that they feel heard and like acknowledged, and not just like, yeah, whatever, we're not going to do it, like deal with it. But also, yeah, like being able to present things pragmatically and be like, look, we would love to, like, here are the actual constraints that we're under. And like, this is truly what it is that is preventing it. If you have the opportunity to present it that way, I have found that to be effective. And if you are like truly empathetic about it, then like that's like the best you can do, right? If they still react badly about it, then that's not something you can control. And I think that's important to remember too, is that like, yeah, it sucks to be the messenger sometimes, but like as long as you're not trying to go out of your way to be malicious about it, like that's business sometimes. But
Only
truly,
so
like
much you can do.
it's I don't know, just as long as there is that space for them to be understood and they understand why decisions are made a certain way, then that's powerful.
So it's kind of like the improv yes and, but it's a no but.
That's a good way to put it. I really
Exactly.
like that. We're gonna get one more question from the audience, so that we get one person can ask a question each. From Bakwai, are data visualization tools useful for production as well, like Looker, Tableau?
Yes, especially if you're a live ops producer. Live ops producers have kind of come in the last 10, 15 years for live service games. And, part of that is half the battle is shipping a game, and then you have to release all the content, events, and things like that. And not just for live service games, all games really have a lot of data connected to them, whether it's in your database or analytics that are tied to events or actions that a player is doing in the game. And using all of that data, it culminates into Looker. Tableau is a very popular one that a lot of studios use, and that data visualization tool is important. And we talked about something that I think is important to correlate to production value, is that you may help with setting up the data pipeline. You may end up working with data analysts and BI engineers. As a producer, there are live ops producers and data producers, and you'll end up working with product managers and game designers on that. But the important thing is, if you can help get those visualizations with that team, you're providing super critical information on success metrics, KPIs. They also call them OKRs, where you're sending to your executive team or your executive producer all of the important data about the team. How long are people playing? Do they play through the full first-time user experience? Are weapons too strong? That flame sword just has way too much damage and it's killing literally every single thing in the game in one hit. You've got to tune that, or your game's going to be broken. Also, obviously, monetization, and there's a lot of engagement metrics that a lot of studios are tracking. So being able to use those data visualization tools, it's really critical to get that data, not just to the executive team. Your game designer is going to want to know if their game's balanced from a player perspective, so very, very critical. And it's something that, producers can help with.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, looking at when people drop off, how are you going to change your content? Even like on Beat Saber, is like what packs are people buying? Like what music resonates with the Beat Saber audience, and do we want to shift that and bring in a new audience? Like that kind of thing too. Being able to make those higher level decisions about the direction of a game and where it's going, super critical. I spend a lot of time looking at graphs, more than I thought I would, as a producer, about the things that exist in the game.
Definitely. One place I've seen a lot of graphs and data is like YouGov. If you get someone that can help you out in YouGov a lot, you can get a lot of good insights into like how people are playing, what they're playing, where they're playing, and stuff like that, age groups, demographics. And that's been really useful for pitching marketing campaigns around live service updates, like how are we targeting this? So you'll run into this data sometimes.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, I think the idea that you kind of we mentioned earlier keeping up with like market trends or game trends, and that seems like it fits into you use a data visualization tool to make sure you can get that through. Awesome. I think we're coming up on time now, so I'd like to express heartfelt thank you to our producers, and yeah, we
Thanks
will
for
be next up hosting our next Student Showcase B. So stick around for that. For now, thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks all.